Welcome, Andrew. Welcome, Andrew. Good to see you. Step right up. How you doing, man?
Good.
You doing well? Well, you got a strong grip. Man, you must be working on the farm or something. I don't know. Andrew, do you feel lucky today?
I guess.
You guess? Okay, that's probably the best answer we could get. I have a challenge for you, okay? I have a pair of wacky dice. They're called wacky because they're not exactly square, are they? That's because the church is on a budget, okay? And we can't buy square boxes. We need to recycle the rectangle boxes that we have. All right, but that's okay. It's a very simple game. You have two dice, and you're going to roll them out down the center aisle one at a time. The numbers need to add up to a total of 7, okay? So, for instance, if I rolled a 5 out there, the next number would have to be a
2.
Very good. If I would roll a 3, then the next dice you would have to roll.
I don't know.
You don't know. Okay, all right. Well, okay. I hope your luck is better than your math skills. All right. But that's all right. Now, here's what I'll do for you because we're friends, right? Here's what I'll do for you. If you happen to roll doubles, I'll let you roll again. Okay? Because if you roll a 7, you get to be able to have, you are going to win this one-of-a-kind autographed portrait of yours truly. Okay? I have printed this out on the church's office copier. And I spent not quite $1.50 on this frame at Walmart last night. So if you roll a 7, this is what you get as a reward. If you don't roll a 7, then that pie that we had up here earlier, it will go to your face, okay? Does that sound fair?
I guess.
You get? Okay. All right. So do you have any questions as to what we're trying to do? You're trying to roll what?
A 7.
Yes. Total, both dice together, add them up, they become 7. If you roll doubles, what happens?
Get to re-roll.
Roll again. If you don't roll a 7, what happens?
Pie.
The pie. Okay. I think we have a mutual understanding. All right. So roll one at a time. Going to roll them down the aisle, and we'll see what you get. All right. I'm cheering for you. Okay. We're all cheering for Andrew, right? Come on, Andrew. Come on. You can do. I know you can do this. The first number is
1.
a 1. Okay. What do you need to roll now in order for this to become a big win for you?
A 7.
Yeah, total of 7, yes. All right, come on, Andrew, come on. And it's a 4, and a 1 only makes a 5. Oh, I'm sorry. Do you like pie?
No.
Okay, well, here's what I ask you to do. If you just put your arms out wide, close your eyes. We don't get it pie in the eye, okay? That's a bad thing. Close your eyes. Your eyes are not closed. Okay, then you turn around this way. Just turn around. Okay, face everybody because everybody wants to see this, okay? Are you ready for this, Andrew? Are you sure? Okay, pie is coming your way. Ready? On 3, everybody. 1, 2, 3. That's for you. Congratulations, Andrew. Thank you so much, Andrew. I appreciate you being such a good sport, not even knowing what you're getting into. Rolling dice, it's kind of a luck thing, right? You never know exactly what you're going to get. There's a saying in Las Vegas. The saying is, "My life is all wrapped up in the roll of the dice." Now, I have been to Vegas. In fact, we were just making a connecting flight, and my wife, she wanted to go up and down the strip and everything, so we did, and then it was time to leave because it's not long before you're done with all of that. But in Las Vegas, you can win big, right? Or you could lose big. I mean, you could roll 7s and everything is amazing, or you could roll boxcars, or you could roll snake eyes and you lose. It could be a windfall. or it could be a colossal disaster. It seems like coincidence, doesn't it? I mean, you go and you play their games. It just seems like, well, it's just the roll of the dice. It's just you risk a little, you might win a little, you might lose a little, who knows? In the book of Esther, it seems like the destiny of the Jews were all wrapped up in the roll of the dice. As we're going to discover here in just a little bit, what happens actually is that God is working behind the scenes to accomplish his kingdom purpose. We're going to be reviewing the book of Esther, and if you're taking notes with a note-taking guide, I'm going to give you just this little helpful hint. You're not going to be able to write anything down until like the very end of the sermon. So if you're thinking, oh, I missed something, you haven't missed anything. So those things will be happening. The notes that you're looking for will be coming up toward the end of the message. So just a help on that. So, I mean, some days, if you kind of feel like our life is just fate, right? Or it's coincidence. We've used those terms before, haven't we? Or just plain old luck. Some of you have good luck. Some of you had bad luck. Some days you roll sevens. Other days, you don't. You roll a 5. Every now and then, though, there's a series of events that takes place, as we see here in the book of Esther, but also in your life. A series of events that you can recognize it's not coincidence. It's not luck. It's not just some, happenstance, but instead you start linking together the activities of a God who is so often working behind the scenes to accomplish his upper story purpose. We realize that our life is governed by something so much greater than luck or the roll of the dice. And so we want to look at the book of Esther because this is one of the most intriguing books of all the Bible. Did you know that in the book of Esther, you don't see the name of God mentioned anywhere? They don't say God, they don't say Lord, they don't say Jesus. They don't mention God's name anywhere at all. And so if you were to read through for the first time, you think, well, I didn't see God doing anything. But if you read it just a little slower, what you'll actually see is that God is working silently but beautifully behind the scenes, directing the affairs of men and women, of kingdoms, in order to bring about his great purpose. The time that it took place was not the 21st century, but it was the 5th century BC. It was not in Las Vegas. Instead, it was a land called Susa, the capital city of the Persian Empire. And it was not in a temple, but instead it was actually in a palace of the capital city called Susa. The empire was ruled by a man named Xerxes, and that is spelled with an X, not with a Z. And so Xerxes, he was known as a man of incredible recklessness and lavishness. Anytime you see Xerxes in the book of Esther, he's either about to go into a party, at a party, or just coming off a party, all right? And so that actually plays a big part into what is going on here. Serving as Xerxes' top aide was the villain of the story, a man by the name of Haman. Haman, it seemed like this guy, everything was always coming up great for Haman. And as you read early on in the story, it mentions Haman was an Agagite. Are there any Agagites here this morning? Anybody at all? Raise your hand high. Probably not. And you're thinking, well, why is that so important that they would tell us that Haman was an Agagite? Well, let me tell you about the Agagites. When God sent his people into the promised land, there were a number of communities and peoples that God was bringing justice to them. The life that they were living, they had exhausted the patience of God. And so God was using Israel to be his enforcer of justice. And so the Lord commanded the very first king of Israel, King Saul, to go and to bring justice upon the Agagite community. They were supposed to wipe them all out. I mean, this is God's divine justice. And we can talk about that in a moment. But some people think, well, why doesn't God step in and solve the evil issues of the world? And that's a great question to ask. But here is a situation where God actually does step in and bring justice upon the evil of the world. And people are saying, hey, God shouldn't do that. So you can only have it one way or the other. Either you want God involved or you don't want God involved. Well, God is involved. He directs Saul to be able to annihilate the Agagite community. Instead of that, what Saul did was he spared some of the best and just a few of the Agagite people, including the king of Agag. And so while God's plan was to wipe them out and to bring justice upon them, King Saul decided he was going to do his own thing. And so we have this very thin thread of the Agagite community continuing on. And it's interesting because now here we are 500 years later. You have this man by the name of Haman, the Agagite. He is put into one of the highest positions in all of the Persian Empire. His plan is to be able to, when he walks down the street, he expects everybody to bow down and worship him. And so this community is filled with not only Persian people, but also with Jewish people as well. One man in particular, his name was Mordecai. He refused to bow down to Haman. Now, Mordecai, you can imagine with him not bowing down, that just filled Haman with rage because Haman knew Mordecai was a Jew. And he has 500 years of Agagite anger building up inside of him. And now he's in the position of authority. And he expects all these people to bow down. And this one Jew, who those Jewish people, years ago, they tried to wipe us all out. Does he dare not to bow down to me? Oh, I'm going to exact my revenge on him. But not just on him. Upon all the Jewish people in the empire. It seems like all the luck was going Haman's way. Haman convinces the king to sign a decree that not just Mordecai, but all of the Jews living in the kingdom would be annihilated. The king gives the order that on a certain day the Jews would be attacked, and as an incentive, whoever you kill, whatever Jew you kill, you get to keep all their stuff. Talk about legalized looting. That's really what we're talking about here. You can murder them and you won't get charged for that. That becomes absolutely legal to murder somebody, and you get to keep all their things. And the way that they would often try to make some decisions back there, they were in Susa, they were very much into divination, witchcraft, and sorcery. They would roll the dice. And that's exactly what Haman did. They said, okay, we got the king to sign this law, and we got to find out, okay, when is this law going to go into effect? And so they rolled the dice. And the date came up for them to be annihilated was 11 months from that particular day. So it would have been right around this time of year, February, March. This is when it would take place. So for the Jews, it was like you were put on death row and your execution was coming up 11 months from now. And there's nothing you can do about it. Everything's coming up sevens for Haman, right? I mean, he just keeps rolling. He had to get 7, 7, 7. The Jews are getting nothing but snake eyes. They're losing over and over again. And by now you know that as we read Scripture, there's a lower story that's going on, but there's also an upper story that's happening. And this is the story of Esther, where the lower story comes into a collision course with God's upper story. King Xerxes, he throws a wild party. Go figure. And so he was celebrating for 180 days. He thought, hey, I got a great idea. Let's have a 7-day party. And so he brought his a big cabinet in, and they were having this great party. 7 days into that party, he's like, hey, I've got another great idea. What is it, king? Bring the queen, Vashti. Bring Vashti out and have her parade in front of us so all of my royal advisors can gaze upon her beauty. So the message was sent to the queen. Vashti, though, she refused to come. She would not make herself a spectacle in front of that drunken crowd of men. Well, that didn't settle real well with the king. So Xerxes, he orders Queen Vashti to be exiled. And so she is put off to pasture somewhere. And as time goes on, the king's like, we have a vacancy in the castle. We need a queen. How am I going to decide who is going to be my queen? And so what the king comes up with is basically his own version of American Idol, but it's actually Persian Idol, okay? And he sends out his aides all throughout the capital city of Susa. He says, bring to me all the most beautiful virgin girls in the entire capital. Bring them to me, and I'll be able to decide which one is going to be the next queen. And that's where we end up with this lady named Esther. The instant the king sees Esther, it is just game over for her. The king immediately selects Esther to be the brand new queen, and guess what he does? To celebrate a new queen, you got to have what? You got to have a party, okay? And so he has another party. We went through this entire story of Esther last year with the junior high kids, and they had a party counter. And every time we came across a party, they marked another party. Oh, let's have another party. Well, he throws a great big party throughout the entire kingdom because we have a new queen. As luck would have it, Esther is the cousin of a man named Mordecai. Remember him? The guy who would not bow down to Haman. And now there's a law saying that not only Mordecai but all the Jews will be annihilated. And as the time is ticking by, they now have just 9 months before the execution of all God's people. You know, as we look at the story, what we end up seeing happening is Mordecai, he tells his cousin Esther, he begs that she would do something. Would you please do something and go to the king and beg for mercy for our people? But because you remember what happened to Vashti? That's what Esther's thinking. Well, you know, Vashti, she kind of got sideways with the king, and now she is exiled. And I mean, if I go before the king without being invited, I am absolutely going to be killed. So I'm sure there's lots of questions that Queen Esther had. Why did we ever stay behind here in Susa? Because the king has given his blessing so that we could all go back to the promised land. Why didn't we just do that? Why didn't we just follow God? Well, why does God allow bad things to happen to good people? Why did Vashti get vanquished when she was doing the right thing? Why was I chosen among all of these other women? Why am I even here as the queen? And why is it that Haman, this wicked man, is put in such a high position? Why does God allow all these things to happen? I believe you're just like I am. If you live long enough, you ask some of those hard questions that we never seem to get answers for, do we? Mordecai, though, he catches a glimpse, I believe, of the upper story of God's plan. As he is there with sackcloth and ashes at the king's gate, Esther sends for him to find out what is going on. And this is what we read from Esther chapter 4. He says to Esther, do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will come from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows that you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai, I will go to the king even though it's against the law. And if I perish, I perish. Just like Queen Esther, we all have to make a decision of who we're aligning our life with. Are we aligning our life with God's purposes and God's plans? Or are we just kind of making this stuff up on our own? Because when we align ourselves with God's purpose and God's plans, suddenly it's not luck or coincidence or just, fate that kind of determines our lives. But instead, we're aligning ourselves up with the sovereign ruler of the universe. And He directs the plans and the affairs of our lives day by day. Could it be that you are where you are right now for such a time as this? Some of you may be wondering, why am I in this school? Why am I in this job? Why am I in this family? Why am I in this church, this community? Why am I where I am today? If your life is aligned with God, He has you right where He wants you to be for such a time as this. Amen? That's why He has you where He has you. Maybe you can't understand all of it right now because God is working so many things behind the scenes. But yet we know that His plans are always good. His timing is always right. And He knows precisely what He's doing. So Queen Esther tells Mordecai, you and all your people fast and pray for 3 days. And Esther says, me and my people here in the palace, we will fast and we will pray. And then she says, and then I will go before the king, even though I have not been invited for the last 30 days. And even if somebody comes to the king without being invited, you could be executed because of that. Let's fast and pray for 3 days. And then I'll go. If I perish, I perish. But I will die trying to live my life in alignment with God Almighty. Well, what should have been certain death for Queen Esther is she opened those palace doors and she walks into the courtroom of the king. She should have been executed at that very instant. But we have yet another incredible coincidence, as they say. Instead, what we find is the king welcomes her. He extends to her the golden scepter and welcomes her into his presence. And he even says, I will give you up to half of my kingdom. All you have to do is ask. Now, that's a pretty great offer right there. Well, Esther, she invites the king to a party. Yeah, I mean, she kind of knows the way to get this guy's attention, right? She invites the king to a party. And she says, oh, can you also bring Haman, your number one advisor? It'd just be the three of us. It comes to the party that night, and this is the way they would do things back then. There's protocol. And so the king says, ask whatever you want. She says, well, if you both will come back tomorrow night, that's when I will tell you or share with you my request. Well, Haman, he's all excited because now he realizes, man, I am like in the inner circle of the king. Not only am I an advisor of the king, but also I got invited to a royal banquet with just me and the king and the queen. I mean, you can't get much better than this. He walks out, and guess what? Guess who he sees on the street? Yeah, he sees Mordecai. He refused to bow down. So he goes home and he's telling his wife about all the great things that happened that day, how things going at work, honey. Yeah, well, what did you guys do for a snack at the break time? And so he tells her all about that, and he tells her about some of the other issues that were going on. And he said about the fancy party he got invited to with just the king and the queen, and it was amazing. And she personally invited me. And he starts bragging about his wealth and his position and his power. And he said, but none of this matters as long as that Jew Mordecai is still alive. So his wife advises him to do something about it. He said, oh, I'm going to do something about it, all right. And he orders a pole to be erected right outside his house. 75 feet high. He said, it's going to be on that pole. That's where Mordecai's body is going to be hanging by the end of this day. And as the night came, the king just could not sleep. So he orders one of his attendants to, would you bring one of the scrolls of the orders of the king's court? Is he thinking, well, a good way to overcome insomnia is to read some of the, if you ever taken a class on history, yeah, it's a good way to put yourself to sleep. And so he thought, well, okay, well, I'll grab one of those scrolls. You can read this to me in a very monotone voice, like all history teachers teach, and then I'll be able to fall asleep like a baby. It just so happened that the attendant pulled out the scroll that shared something about Mordecai. You see, it turns out that years ago, Mordecai actually overheard an assassination attempt, a plot that was going to take place, and people were going to actually kill the king. Mordecai reports this, and they investigate, and sure enough, there were two individuals who wanted to assassinate the king. And they were captured and they were executed. And so the king asked, he says, so what was done for Mordecai? What reward was given to him for saving the life of the king? And it just so happened that there was nothing ever done for Mordecai. And so the king's thinking, we've got to do something here to honor this man. I mean, he saved my life. There's got to be some way we can reward Mordecai for his act of bravery and for the way he saved my life. And so they hear someone out in the outer court, and the king asks, who's out there in the outer court? Well, it just so happened that it was Haman who was in the outer court of the king. He said, well, bring Haman in here. So Haman goes in there and talks to the king, and the king says, what should I do to honor the person I delight in? Well, Haman is so full of himself, he's thinking, well, he's got to be talking about me. I mean, who else, really? And so Mordecai, or Haman is saying, well, here's what the king should do. He should tell someone to bring a horse from the royal stable. And then also be able to give that person one of the royal robes the king has worn in public, and have that person paraded around all the streets of the capital city and say, this is what is done to the one the king wants to honor. Haman's thinking, oh, this is going to be amazing. I'm going to be wearing the robe. I'm going to be sitting on the horse, be paraded around town. Everybody's going to be bowing down to me. This is going to be great. Then Xerxes says, that's a great plan. In fact, I want you, Haman, to do all of that for Mordecai. You remember the man that Haman hates? I could just imagine Haman parading Mordecai all through the streets, holding on to the horse. This is what the king does to the man whom he delights in. Probably under his breath he's saying, you can enjoy this now, Mordecai, but it's going to be very short-lived. And as we see Haman marching through the streets, and then he recognizes that the very man who he wants to destroy, that's the one the king wants to honor. After that whole parade of Haman and Mordecai all through the streets, Haman goes back home. He's like, oh man, do you realize what happened? He tells his wife what's taking place. It seems like Haman's luck is finally starting to turn. Instead of rolling sevens, he's rolling fives now. At the first dinner party, the queen invited the king and Haman to come back the next day. Well, guess what? After the party, it's the next day. And so it was at their party that she tells the king, would you please spare my life and the life of my people? The king's like, what are you talking about? She said, well, if you wrote a law that would just make us slaves, I wouldn't say a thing. but the law that you signed is a law for the annihilation of all of my people, the Jews. And the king said, well, who would ever dare to come up with an idea like that? And Esther points across the table and she says, it is him, Haman. The king is furious with what Haman has done, and he storms out. Haman, he falls down before the queen, begging for mercy. Just as the king comes back in, the king thinks that Haman is trying to make a play on his wife. And he orders Haman to be taken out. And just as he's being taken out, there's an attendant says, hey, guess what? Haman has erected a pole 75 feet high. And the king says, why don't you execute Haman on that pole that he's built up? So suddenly Haman's life is taken from him. You think, okay, hey, this is great. But no, it's not so great. Because there's still the law on the books that's saying, you know what, on that particular day in February, March, all the Jews are going to be annihilated. Now what are we supposed to do? And so the queen, she begs the king to do something. And so the king says, well, here's exactly what I'm going to do. I want Mordecai to come in. So she brings in Mordecai, her cousin. Mordecai is given Haman's position in the kingdom, and also given Haman's entire estate. And he directs Mordecai, would you write a new law that would be able to allow the Jewish people to protect themselves when that day comes? And sure enough, that's exactly what happens. And we say, well, boy, that's a lucky development, isn't it? Yeah, it really is lucky. It just so happened that all of that just took place like that. While the king could not repeal his order, he could write a new order. And on that day, as it came in February, March, actually the technical term is the month of Adar, A-D-A-R, on Adar 13th, it was a bloodbath. Throughout the entire kingdom, 75,000 people died, but not one Jew. The Jews were able to protect themselves, and not only did 75,000 people who hated the Jews die, but that also included 10 of Haman's sons. To celebrate their incredible victory, what Esther directs the people to do is we need, you know what, we kind of like to party around here. It's kind of a thing we got going. Like, let's have a celebration. And what we're going to do to celebrate is we're going to call this the Feast of Purim. Because it all started with these dice. The word pur means dice. We're going to celebrate the sovereign protection of the Lord Almighty upon us and upon His people. It's a reminder that God's upper story is always advancing forward. It's not ruled by chance. It's not ruled by luck or coincidence or fate, but instead the plans of God are ruled by His sovereign control. The reign of God is not limited to the empire of Susa or Jerusalem or 500 BC. The reign and rule of God is today, and His kingdom is forever. I don't know just what your greatest fears might be right now, or the greatest questions that you have right now, or the biggest issues that you have right now, but could it be that God has called you to this kingdom, His kingdom, for such a time as this? Could it be that even in your hard times, that God is working all things together for His good, for your good, for His glory? This is the verse out of Proverbs that I think really does a great job of underlining what we're talking about today. It tells us, we may roll the dice, but the Lord determines how they fall. We may roll the dice. We make our decisions, but ultimately God is in control, that God is sovereign over all. Here's the very point that I'm trying to make, is that you and your life is not governed by chance or governed by coincidence or governed by luck. Ultimately, God is in control. That's what it means. He is sovereign over all. Within His sovereignty, He allows you to make decisions. He gives you free will. You can join in with His plan, or you can choose to reject His plan. But ultimately, His kingdom will last forever and ever. Just as He was working way back then in this incredible empire of Persia, in that capital city of Susa, He was working with people like Esther and Mordecai and even Haman. God is working in your life today. Here's a few key takeaways that you may bring out of the book of Esther. The first thing is this: God is always at work, even when we don't see Him. He's always working. Do you believe that? He's always working. You know, even though God's name is never mentioned in the book of Esther, we see Him right behind. He's not just a character in the story. He's the one who's writing the story. He's writing the story of your life and of my life as well. He was working in every moment, positioning people like Esther and Mordecai for such a time as this, and even overturning the evil plans of people like Haman. And as we look at this, maybe we feel right now life is uncertain. I got a lot more questions than answers. But here's one thing that you can build your life upon. God is working behind the scenes. Romans 8:28. Can we just read all that together? I'll have it on the screen for you. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. Even when we can't see it, He's working. Even when we can't feel it, He's working. He never stops. He never stops working. Second lesson I can pull out from this is you are where you are for a reason. You are placed where you are for a purpose. That's what Mordecai said to Esther. Who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. God put her as the queen, not just for her blessings, but also to be a blessing to other people. And God has put you where you are, your job, your family, your community, your school. It is not by accident, it's by divine appointment. He has you there for a reason. Let's look for ways that we can be a bright light, even if it's in a dark place. Another lesson is courage requires faith, not comfort. It's easy to say we're courageous, but until it pushes us out of our comfort zone. That's what Esther had to do. She said, if I perish, I perish. You know, she risked everything to appear before the king, stand up for her people. That's incredible courage. It was not comfortable for her to do that. It was incredible courage. Oftentimes, God requires you and me to step out in faith, outside of where we're comfortable, so that we can make the biggest impact. And quite frankly, I don't like standing in front of people. I would much rather sit right back down there with you guys, pass the Cheerios back and forth in the back row. I mean, those kind of, I get into that stuff. I'm there. That'd be comfortable for me. But God says, I'm calling you to be courageous, not comfortable. Now, compared to what some of the steps God's calling you to take, my step is very small. But He's calling you to be courageous, just as He did to Joshua of old and to Esther of old. He's calling you and me to be courageous. Oh, here's something else that we see. Pride will lead to destruction every time. Pride destroys, but the humble are exalted. I love what it says in Proverbs. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Well, we can see the pride in Haman's life. That ultimately led to his destruction. But we also see the humility of people like Mordecai. I will humbly honor God in this moment, in this time. I don't know how it's all going to work out, but I'm going to humbly honor him and believe that someday he's going to honor me. And that's exactly what God calls us to do. Stay humble. Trust God, even when you can't see him working. In due time, he's going to lift you up, and that's what he promises in the book of James. Humble yourself before Almighty God, and in good time, he will lift you up. Don't let pride be your downfall. When Esther found out about the law to kill all of the Jews, she told Mordecai, she said, you know what, okay, I want you and your people to fast and pray for 3 days. And me and my people in the palace, we're going to fast and pray for 3 days. This is something that we really ought to remember. Fasting and prayer brings breakthrough. Maybe you remember what Jesus was saying as he came down off the Mount of Transfiguration, and his disciples were saying, well, there's this person that they brought to us for healing, and we prayed over him, but he's not healed. What's going on? And Jesus said that there are certain problems in your life that are only solved through prayer and fasting. As I went through the book of Esther once again, and there have been times in my life that I've taken time to pray. I pray a lot. You know one thing I don't do much of? I don't fast very much. Maybe there are some situations that it's a brick wall right now that you're busting up against, and it's not moving, it's not changing, things aren't getting any better. Could it be that God is calling you to pray and fast for the breakthrough that he wants to accomplish? She says, go, gather all the Jews, don't eat or drink for 3 days, and I and my tenants will do the same. We will fast as you do. When's the last time you've taken time to fast and pray? Could it be that's exactly what God is leading you to right now? No matter what you face, God is in control. He's willing to do whatever it takes to bring you to where he wants you to be, but also so that he can position you to make the greatest good in his kingdom.